Welcome back to the CMO Summit. Before we get going with the next helping of inspiring content, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors for helping us bring this event to your screens. And don't forget, you can access even more content from articles and interviews to our podcast series at cmoalliance.io. Enjoy the next session. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the CMO Summit. I'm really pleased to have everyone here and introduce our next session of the day, which is going to be looking at the age of the self-serve buyer. And I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, Vinay Bhagat, who is founder and CEO of TrustRadius. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Caitlin. Well, I'm delighted to be with everyone here today. I'm going to be talking about, as Caitlin mentioned, the age of the self-serve buyer, how today's modern generation of buyers navigates their research process, what it implies for sales and marketing, and how go-to-market teams can adapt to the new buying behaviors. And this is all predicated on an annual research study we do of over 2,000 B2B technology buyers. We are about to publish a report next month, and what you're seeing is a preview of data from that report, along with a discussion of implications. So fundamentally, one of the things that's really important to understand about the buying market today, in B2B technology in particular, is that younger buyers have changed the journey. 65% of today's B2B buyers, including in the enterprise, in positions of decision-making authority, self-report as being millennials or Generation Z. These individuals have grown up with social media, with Google, with Yelp and TripAdvisor, and frankly, in a motivated and empowered mechanism to conduct a lot of their research. Just think about how they purchase as consumers. If they're buying a new automobile, they're probably not going to go to a car sales room to get their advice. They're going to do a lot of their research online. They're going to watch videos. They're going to go to pricing sites like TrueCar to understand what they should be paying. And then when they actually do go to a showroom, it's because they're ready to test drive or ready to purchase. A year ago, we found that 87% of buyers wanted to do some form of self-serve for their buying journey. Today, it's virtually 100%. Now, the interesting thing about this trend is it's not just the behavior of millennials and Gen Z. We're seeing these patterns now manifest across generations, across Gen X and boomers as well. But we think the real catalyst has been this influx of this new generation. And let's remember, millennials are up to 39 years old, so it's a large portion of the buying population. Let's talk about what self-service actually means. So in the survey, we asked buyers, what are the kinds of information that they want to find prior to actually engaging with sales? What are the types of information they want to self-serve around? Finding pricing is top of the list. Now, I know a lot of technology vendors are cautious about sharing pricing information. Maybe you sell through the channel. Maybe there's a complex discounting structure. Maybe there's some complexity to your pricing. What buyers are really looking for in the first phase is just, we call it t-shirt size pricing. They want to understand if the price is in the appropriate ballpark or if they should be shopping in a different neighborhood. They want to understand the product specs, what your product actually can do. There's a huge interest in accessing a free version or free trials of software. That's why the whole motion around product-led growth, companies that support trials or freemiums, has been so successful. They want to understand the use cases for your products, and they want to hear that validation from your customers. By use cases, they realize that maybe a software broadly fits into a category, but there's specificity about how it might work for different use cases. And they want to know if your software is going to be a pattern match for their needs. And the best way to validate that with them is to show examples and testimony from customers with similar use cases. If they can't access a free trial or demo, a free trial or a freemium version of your software, certainly demos are incredibly important. We see an appetite to watch both self-guided tours, recorded demos, and also we're now seeing an interest in actually seeing user-generated demos from fellow customers as well. So bottom line is younger generation of buyers, 65% millennial and Gen Z, and all buyers now have a strong motivation and desire to conduct most of their journey and source lots of information online. Now, there are a number of things that you can do, and I'll be talking about that throughout this presentation in terms of how you can adapt. But a few things that are kind of no-brainers are have some kind of indicative software pricing on your site. Again, it doesn't have to be precise or a pricing calculator, although those would be awesome. What they're really, again, looking for is indicative pricing. Pricing starts at, or pricing for enterprise, pricing for mid-market, etc. If you're able to offer a demo or trial from your site, that's super important. I know companies have gone down the mode of gating access to demos in order to generate leads. Certainly understand that motivation, but buyers would much prefer to see that type of content in an ungated fashion. And thirdly, using reviews on your own website, but doing so intelligently and contextually. So don't just show generic reviews, make sure the reviews are pertinent to the page they're being displayed on. So if you have a pricing page, for example, make sure the reviews talk to your pricing, your relative competitive pricing, your value for money. If you sell to different industries, make sure that the industry pages have quotes dynamically showing from people in that same industry. If you are going to have content from reviews syndicated to like a homepage, make sure there's a diversity of content that reflects all of the different customer segments and personas that you serve, so that as people scroll through, they see that diversity and understand that there are people that they relate to. Another big trend that we're seeing is a shift from vendor-produced resources to third-party sources. In other words, buyers would prefer to get their information from independent sources. Now, again, top of the list here is product demos, which they're obviously getting from you, the brand. But that, again, gives them a sense of tangibility of the products. Trials are, again, super important. But user reviews continue to rise each year in popularity. In 2021, in our study, 45% of B2B tech buyers use user reviews in their journey. In 2022, it was 55%. And we are seeing this trend across companies of all sizes. Notably, the fastest growing segment in their use of reviews was companies above 10,000 employees. A year ago, 39% of those buyers in that segment of 10,000 employees and above use reviews. It's now 51%. Again, your website is important, but it's increasingly less important relative to third-party sources. In addition to review platforms, communities and forums can be highly influential. For example, if you sell development products, forums like Stack Overflow and Reddit can be super important. Interestingly, analysts continue to be important. Again, people are looking for that third-party validation. One of the areas that's declining the most rapidly is the consumption of information from sales reps. There's a strong desire, once again, for buyers to defer the point at which they engage sales. And oftentimes they've done a great deal of their homework before they actually choose to speak to sales. Now, sales is not dead yet, but sales does need to reinvent itself to be more relevant based upon how the buyers are conducting their research. 5 years, for 5 years consistently from 2016 to 2021, as we've done this study, the top 5 sources of information used were product demos, the vendor's website, user reviews, vendor reps, and free trials accounts in order. In 2022, the deck got reshuffled. Demos remain number 1. Free trials jumped from number 5 to number 2. I think, again, commensurate with the product-led growth movement and a desire, again, to touch and feel the products. User reviews stayed in number 3, but again, we saw an escalation in usage across company sizes. the vendor website, your site dropped in relevancy as a source or a critical source from number 2 to 4, and communities rose to number 5, and notably missing from the top 5 resources was vendor reps. Again, we're seeing to a good degree a disintermediation of the role of sales reps in the buyer's journey. And there is some variance by purchase price and by generation. So, for example, purchases above $100,000, reps were used in 2021 over 50% of the time. In 2022, it dropped into the 40s, so it's still material. But as you can see, the cheaper the purchase, the less relevant reps are in terms of a source of influence. But for each of those segments of spend, the usage of reps continues to be on a year-to-year decline. We also see some variance with generations. Unsurprisingly, younger generations use sales reps materially less than older generations. And again, some of those generations, you see a pretty rapid rate of decline in their use and reliance of sales reps for information in their journey. We see the same pattern across company sizes. So even large companies at large buyers over 10,000 employees, again, are increasingly relying less on reps and doing more to report their usage of again, third-party resources like reviews. So let's kind of try and net this out. At a macro level, buyers are saying they want easy access to information and they want no cold calls. In fact, I ran at my own company, we ran our Q2 kickoff yesterday. We invited 3 customers in to speak to us, and we sell to marketers. We had a CMO, we had a VP of customer marketing, we had a director of digital on a panel. And all 3 of them basically said they ignored cold emails and they couldn't abide cold calls. In fact, they made them mad. So how do you actually work in such an environment where the buyers, again, really don't want to be sold to in that sort of in that way where they have unwanted solicitation? So again, 3 things that make buyers less likely to buy from you: cold calls, having no software pricing available on your website, unclear messaging about what you do. I think as an industry, the enterprise tech industry is still very guilty of having confusing messaging. Also, oftentimes buyers report that it's extremely hard to discern the differences between products. So clarity around how your product is different to your competitors is super important, and validating that differentiation through social proof is super important as well. They, again, would prefer to be able to see demos or access trials without speaking to sales. And again, if you don't have customer stories and testimony on your website, that's a big no-no. So what are a few things you can do to make people more likely to buy from you? Pricing transparency. Again, it doesn't have to be a pricing calculator. Indicative pricing is really the core expectation. The ability to access a demo and a free trial without having to talk to sales. Yes, they may fill out a gated form, but ideally keeping it open is even better. And showing customer reviews on your website. Again, people are spending time on your site. It may be declining relative to third-party forums, but the time they spent on your site is super important. You're probably spending a lot of effort in organic search to get people to your site. You're probably spending a material amount of money on paid media to drive them to your site. So to optimize conversion, you need to really instill that confidence and trust in them. And the best way to do that is to show that tailored customer evidence in the form of snippets from reviews or customer stories. So those are a few of the main ways that you can adapt to make yourself more in line with how the modern buyer wants to buy. And let's talk about current marketing strategies and how they may not be aligned to today's buyer. Paid search remains a successful strategy, but frankly, it's getting more and more expensive to actually get results purely with paid search. Events are returning to fashion, but with the pandemic, I think obviously we've been without physical events for some period of time. There's still a good branding opportunity and cultivation opportunity, but again, are expensive from a pure demand perspective. Ad spend, whether it's social advertising or display, if you're marketing to your entire ICP, depending on the size of your market, that can get immensely expensive. And so finding ways to be able to target your ads or increase the conversion on your ads is super important. And again, while sales engagement tools have made it super easy to automate cold sales outreach, what buyers are saying is like blasting them with impersonal messages that are not reflective of where they are in their journey or specifically what they care about is increasingly less effective and frankly alienates them. So the bottom line is, as marketers, we've got to figure out how to adapt and tune our processes to be more effective with today's buyer. We believe that there are three core strategies. First and foremost, you need to make sure that you are discoverable in the modes and venues that buyers are doing their research. Buyers report to us that once they have identified a need for technology, the first thing that they do is to actually consult a review platform. Another thing that they might do is do a Google search. Another thing they might do is go to a trusted community. So it's essential to be present and be significant in the primary review platforms that those prospective customers visit. It's important to be present and have to be vocal, whether that's directly yourself or through empowering customer advocates in the communities that people trust and use. And it's important to have a strong in-house organic search strategy. The second thing that's essential is to harness the voice of the customer in your own digital marketing and communications. Again, buyers trust their peers more than they trust you, and therefore infusing the voice of the customer into landing pages, into ads, onto your main website, into your sales communications will both serve to create trust with the buyers, improve conversion. It helps with SEO, as I'll share in a second. And it also helps differentiate you if your competition is not effectively harnessing the voice of the customer. And last but certainly not least, one of the most powerful strategies at your disposal today is to use buyer intent signals in order to focus your advertising on companies that actually have purchasing propensity. So instead of marketing to your entire ICP, you can narrow to just the companies that actually have a signal of intent and therefore see an increase in conversion. The digital marketer who was on our customer panel yesterday said that they see between a 40 and a 75% higher conversion rate on ads that are driven by our buyer intent data versus generalized ads to the ICP. That particular company spends $1 million a month on advertising, so you can do the math. If you're driving 40 to 75% higher conversion on your ads, that's a huge ROI to use that strategy. So let's talk about what it means to build a strategic presence on third-party forums. There are a number of review platforms. You've got to pick, I'd say, the 2 to 3 that makes most sense for your audience. Don't be fooled by kind of vanity metrics in marketing. Understand which forums are relevant for your community. Understand how much traffic they have in your specific category. It's relevant. It's irrelevant if they have large traffic volumes in other categories. What matters is what's the audience in your category. Assess whether they attract the customer segments that you desire. Are you an SMB company, or are you a mid-market enterprise company, or are you a mixture of the two? And then also whether they influence actual decision makers or pure end users. Speaking for TrustRadius, we find that 54% of our audience are from mid-market and enterprise companies, and 75% of our audience are decision makers. You should work with more than one review platform. Again, speaking for ourselves, we overlap no more than 20% with other review platforms. So 10% of our audience also visits Gartner Peer Insights, 20% of our audience visits G2. Those are the two platforms that we see, aside from ourselves, that most brands tend to evaluate. Increase in organic traffic. Again, it's not just about being present on third-party sites. As a brand, it's essential that you think seriously about how to optimize your own organic search strategy. One of the simple mechanisms that we have found is that by syndicating dynamic review content to your own website, you can drive more traffic. And it works because of three things. One, the content in reviews is very keyword rich. And when you build a carousel, like in this example that IBM has deployed on one of their pages for their flash systems products, that content is all crawled by search engines and helps them rank for more keywords. So 3 months after implementing this review widget, IBM was starting to see 10 new keywords that they ranked for. And those keywords were pertaining to the category and would have been very expensive to buy in PPC. Number two, we find that the inclusion of such a widget increases engagement on the page. Buyers will scroll deeper on the page. They'll spend more time on the page. Google Analytics has a calculator that they call page value that assesses the quality of the page and determines how much search traffic you get. On average, IBM has seen about a 20 to 30% lift in page value by having these widgets deployed on their site. And so what that's netted out to them is about 15% more traffic, or saving about $100,000 a year on this one page in terms of cost per click. When you multiply that across all of the pages that you could deploy such a widget and tailor it to the content of the page, it can be a very, very large economic value. We've also found that it's possible to change the markup in your search engine results in order to display your count of reviews and your star rating. In other words, to create social proof. And we found that brands who have search engine results that display that social proof see higher click-through rates and rise in search rankings as a result. Another thing to think about is compete pages. So if you've got specific competitors, sometimes brands are loath to actually create compete pages where they talk about their differences themselves, but it's very different to have your customers explain what your differences are. So tagging content that's specifically about why someone picked you over a competitor and creating a compete page out of that content is a great strategy to get more organic traffic. Improving conversion. So the same syndicated reviews, when used contextually on landing pages, can improve conversion. An example on the left for a request a demo page, this recruiting platform saw a 50% lift in conversion. On the right-hand side, this company Veeam that's offering free trials saw a 70% lift in conversion by incorporating social proof like badges, but also quotes on the page as well. Let's turn to the last topic, intent data. So there are different forms of intent data. We like to think of it in terms of first, second, and third party. So first party data is your own data, people visiting your own website, people visiting, interacting with your own marketing automation touch points. And that clearly is a very strong signal of intent, but it's a narrow aperture or a narrow signal of intent. It doesn't help you understand what's happening with buyers who are earlier in their journey and haven't yet chosen to visit your website. And it doesn't help you see the deals that your competition is doing, but are seeing, but where those companies aren't evaluating you. The other end of the spectrum, there is third-party intent, where services like Bombora aggregate data from thousands of different media properties, where people are reading articles or searching specific keywords, and they can help you understand at a meta level, who has interest in your category. Maybe you can run some form of advertising against that, but it's a high volume, kind of low fidelity game. Many of those people, again, are early in their journey. Not everyone is buying. Some of them may just be interested in the topic. Second party data is where you have a dedicated audience who's definitively researching your product, your category, and you can license that data and use it in your advertising. So TrustRadius is a form of second-party intent data where we as a platform have 1 million people using our site, and we can help you understand, again, who's researching your product, who's researching your competitors, who's researching your category, and exactly what are they doing? Are they accessing pricing data, feature data? Are they running specific product comparisons? And that can help you both target advertising, but also feed your sales team with intelligence and feed your account teams to help you understand if you've got maybe current customers at risk. Just a couple of outcomes. So Logic Monitor in the network monitoring space is seeing a 2x lift in conversion. Planful in the finance space is seeing a 60% increase in year-on-year conversion. And WatchGuard, a company in the security space, spent $200 and was able to influence $1 million of pipeline. Again, materially increasing the ROI on their ad spend. I hear from a lot of companies that LinkedIn advertising in particular is pretty expensive, but if you can lift your conversion rates 50, 100%, it makes that channel just a lot more affordable. So just to summarize before I take questions, there's a new generation of buyers, 65% millennials and Gen Z, that they buy differently, they self-serve, they're using a variety of sources to do their research. They are relying more on third-party resources. They want to access free pricing. They want to access demos and trials. It's critical for you to be present on third-party forums to optimize your own organic search strategy. It's critical for you to activate your customers to speak for you, not just in third-party forums, but to use that content in your own channels for your own SEO and for your own conversion optimization and to enable sales. And intent data helps you really focus your ad spend and your prospecting engagement on buyers who are actively shopping, and it gives you the intelligence to share the right messages with them to be optimal in your results. So at this point, I would love to take any questions that you might have.
Thanks so much. It was great. We've got a couple of questions come through in the chat here. We've got one from Doug who has said, is that syndication considered duplicate content?
Actually, Google doesn't look at it that way. We haven't seen any kind of duplicate content penalty from having that content. It's a great question, but we haven't seen Google penalize brands for using that content. Also, it's what companies are doing is they're not syndicating a whole review; they're syndicating a soundbite. So what they're able to do is look at a review, tag interesting, we call them money quotes, and associate them with a theme or a value. It could be, this is a quote about ROI, this is a quote about a specific feature, this is a quote from a specific persona, and they can create multiple tags associated with a quote and then feed those relevant quotes dynamically to different pages. So typically they're only syndicating 1 or 2 sound bites from a review and then leading someone to a review. But what we find is that when the reviews get syndicated into a carousel format, there's a lot of activity around the carousel, people clicking and scanning all of the quotes or many of the quotes to see if they can find people they can relate to. But only about 1% of people actually click outside. And if they do that, they're opening up another browser. But to answer the question succinctly, no, it's not a duplicate content issue.
Nice, thank you. And we've got another question here from Decker, who has asked, what's the pricing range for TrustRadius intent data?
Yeah, today we package in kind of 3 ways our offerings. We have an offering we call Customer Voice, where we help brands generate reviews and then use that content for conversion optimization and SEO in their channels. We have an offering we call Ultimate that adds what's called product level intent data, where we provide intelligence on who's researching you and what they're doing. And then we have what's called category intent data, where we give you the full access to buyers in an entire category. Now, many companies exist in more categories than one, and so they can license data in multiple categories. Pricing for us, from a package perspective, typically is between $30,000 and $50,000 a year, which includes different flavors of intent data. But we'd have to understand how many categories you're trying to get data for to give you a more precise estimate of what the offering might cost.
Great. If there's any other questions people want to drop in, we've got 1 minute left. We can answer one more. But if not, we've got, some nice comments there in the chat. One from David said, "This is great, fantastic presentation, and Doug, super helpful. Thank you." I think we've just had two more questions come in last minute. So we've got one from Andy who's asked, what's the best practice on using TrustRadius branding on the homepage, and what metrics do you have on conversion?
Yeah, so there are kind of two forms of potential content from TrustRadius that companies that work with us can use. One is the actual syndicated reviews, and I recommend if you're going to put content on your homepage, you put, again, a variety of content that reflects all the personas and segments that you wish to sell to. We work with actually a UK-based company called Matillion that chose that while they sell to different segments, they're trying to orient around the enterprise and be known as an enterprise solution. So they've chosen to focus on their enterprise customer sound bites. So it just depends on who you're trying to demonstrate to the world is who you serve. When you think about taking content onto other pages on your site, you're going to want to tune that content more again to the theme of the page if it's for an industry or a persona. In terms of conversion, when the content is used on landing pages, we see it typically a 30% lifting conversion. It does vary according to placement on the page, the mix of the traffic between organic and paid. So we've seen anything from 20 to over 100% lifting conversion, but 30 is a good rule of thumb.
Great. And one more question here from David, who has asked, early stage startup seed round with a budget consideration and new website launching in 2 weeks, would you focus more on SEO or paid media ads for, let's say, phase 1 approach to reach buyers?
Unfortunately, there isn't a simple answer here. It's probably you have to do both in parallel. I mean, SEO, if you can get it right, is obviously an enormously effective vehicle, but it can take a while to build SEO. And paid ads can be a faster, short-circuit way. It can also be a way to teach you what SEO content you should be writing by running ads as a testing vehicle. Now, you can massively control your spend. You can just have a small experiment budget and learn from it. But I think to only go down the SEO route and have no paid strategy is not good. You need to have some dedicated testing budget for paid.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thanks, Vinay, for a great presentation. And thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already done so, please go and join our CMO Slack channel where you can continue the conversation and network with other attendees. And stick with us for the rest of the day. Thanks again.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, everyone. Enjoyed my time.
See you soon.